The High Court finally scheduled the hearing of Pandem Mlalahoi's case. Then finally, Judgment Day arrived. Pandem Mlalahoi and his lawyer entered the courtroom silently, carrying years of pain and expectation. The judge adjusted her glasses and began reading the judgment.
I have carefully reviewed the evidence presented before the court by both parties in this matter, and I find it pertinent to note that the law which previously granted permission for the use of the land has since been repealed and is therefore no longer in force.
The courtroom became still. Then the judge continued.
The plaintiff has no outstanding claim against the defendant, the local council, because the repealed law can no longer support his case. Courts decide matters according to existing laws, and no law currently supports the plaintiff's claim.
Then came the final words.
Having stated the above, this case is hereby dismissed with costs awarded to the defendant. The right to appeal against this court's decision is hereby granted.
Then the judge left the courtroom. The words struck Pandem like a death sentence. Without speaking to his lawyer, he slowly walked out of the courtroom, carrying the folded judgment papers inside an old brown envelope. Rain began falling as Pandem returned to the tiny rented room where his family now lived. Mkapendeza looked at his face before he even spoke. She already knew. The children sat silently on the floor. Pandem lowered himself onto a broken wooden chair. His hands trembled.
The court dismissed everything,
he said weakly. Mkapendeza's eyes immediately filled with tears.
What reason did they give?
Pandem opened the papers slowly.
They said the law that gave the permission to build the shop rooms is now outdated. Therefore, I have no right to claim anything.
Silence swallowed the room. Only rain hitting the iron roof could be heard. Then their firstborn daughter, Gianna, spoke softly.
But Dad, those shops were built by your sweat, and our sweat too. The truth remains that it is our property.
Pandem looked away painfully.
In this world, my daughter, truth alone is not always enough.
That night, nobody slept. The next morning, Pandem visited his lawyer. After reviewing the judgment, the lawyer sighed deeply.
This case should not end here.
Pandem lifted his tired eyes.
You still believe we can win?
Yes.
The lawyer replied.
The Court of Appeal may overturn this judgment. The High Court focused only on the repeal of the law and ignored the unlawful eviction and the developments you made on the land.
For a brief moment, hope returned to Pandem's face, but it disappeared immediately when the lawyer added,
Filing an appeal will require money.
Pandem swallowed hard.
How much?
When the lawyer mentioned the amount, Pandem nearly collapsed.
That is impossible.
The lawyer remained silent for a moment before speaking carefully.
I have a friend, another advocate. If somehow he agreed to help without payment, maybe things could move forward.
Pandem immediately stood up.
Take me to him.
That afternoon, he visited the advocate's wealthy friend. The man lived in a large, modern house with expensive furniture and polished floors. Tea was served. Pandem sat nervously, holding his old cap tightly in his hands. Finally, with shame in his voice, he spoke.
My family is suffering. I only ask for help to obtain justice.
The advocate listened quietly. Then Pandem said something that shocked the room.
If you agree to marry my daughter Gianna without dowry, perhaps you could help me file the appeal without charging legal fees.
The room became painfully silent. The advocate stared at him in disbelief.
You want to exchange your daughter for legal services?
Pandem lowered his head.
I am desperate.
What level of education does your daughter have?
Pandem answered quietly.
She dropped out in primary 4 because we failed to pay school fees.
The advocate shook his head slowly.
I cannot do.
Then he added coldly,
And honestly, I cannot marry someone without education.
Those words pierced Pandem like a knife. He stood up slowly.
I understand.
He walked home more broken than before. Along the way, he thought to himself,
If none of my daughters received enough education, it means none of them may be able to marry. Where will I take them, and what future will they have?
That evening, the family sat together in darkness because they had failed to buy kerosene. After a long silence, Mkapendeza finally spoke.
There is only one thing left.
Pandem looked at her carefully.
Your father's land.
Pandem immediately closed his eyes.
No, no, no.
We have no choice.
Mkapendeza replied painfully.
If we do nothing, the council wins forever.
Several days later, Pandem traveled back to his village. The village looked peaceful, but his heart carried unbearable pain. His elderly mother welcomed him warmly outside the small mud house.
My son, you have become so thin and look very worried.
That evening, Pandem explained everything. The old woman listened silently. When he finished, she stared at the ground for a long time.
So, you want to mortgage the land?
Tears rolled down Pandem's face.
I never wanted this, Mother.
The old woman looked toward the cassava farm, swaying gently in the wind. Near their small hut stood the enormous estate of a wealthy neighbor. Finally, she nodded slowly.
If this land can restore your dignity, then do it.
The next morning, they met the wealthy neighbor and told him they wanted to borrow money from him. The man spoke confidently.
I can lend you the money, but business is business.
Pandem swallowed hard.
What are your terms?
You must return the money within 1 year.
Pandem hesitated.
And if I fail?
The man leaned back calmly.
The land and the mud house become mine.
Pandem's mother lowered her head in silence. After painful hesitation, Pandem signed the agreement with trembling hands. When the neighbor handed him the money, it felt less like hope and more like selling part of his soul. Back in town, the appeal was filed immediately, but the Court of Appeal delayed the matter again and again. Months passed, then a year. Every week, Pandem visited the court registry and received the same answer. The file is still pending. Meanwhile, the wealthy neighbor took over the family land after the repayment period expired. Pandem's elderly mother, after selling her house, holed belongings she then left the village, carrying only a small bag of clothes. When she arrived in town, Pandem felt completely broken. Now the entire family lived inside one tiny rented room. Pandem, Mkapendeza, their 4 children, Pandem's elderly mother. Sleeping became difficult. Some slept on the floor, others remained seated because there was not enough space. One night, the family room became even more crowded after Eglindsdal gave birth to a baby boy inside the same tiny room. The child was named Dick. Nobody in the family knew the identity of the child's father. As months passed, Eglindsdal was forced to leave baby Dick under the care of his grandmother while she searched for informal work in the streets and markets. The child grew up almost like an orphan, despite his mother still being alive. Stress slowly consumed Pandem. He developed severe headaches. Sometimes his right arm trembled uncontrollably. Still, every morning he forced himself to continue searching for hard labor work to feed the family. Then, one evening, while returning home from work, Pandem suddenly collapsed. Neighbors rushed him to the hospital. Mkapendeza held his hand desperately. At hospital.
Please fight. You cannot leave us now.
Pandem struggled to speak with a murmuring sound.
My children.
His speech became unclear. Doctors later confirmed that he had suffered a severe stroke caused by overwhelming and prolonged stress. Yet even then, the appeal case remained pending. Months later, something unexpected happened. A hearing notice finally arrived. The Court of Appeal had scheduled the case. Pandem, now confined to a wheelchair, stared at the papers in disbelief. He had waited almost 4 years for this moment. On the hearing day, the courtroom was completely silent. Pandem was brought to court in his wheelchair by Mkapendeza and Eglinstall. His elderly mother also attended. Then Pandem's lawyer stood before the panel of judges and spoke firmly.
My lords, this case is not merely about property. It is about injustice that destroyed an entire family.
He presented original building documents, tax payment records, evidence of unlawful eviction, and proof that the local council had collected rent from the shop rooms for years after removing Pandem. After Pandem's lawyer finished his presentation, the council of the local council stood up and started presenting. My lords, said the council of the local council. Then the council of the local council submitted before the court that the High Court trial judge had judicially determined the case in favor of the local council on the ground that the former law, which had granted Pandem Mlalahoi permission to use the land and erect his shop rooms, had since become defunct. In its place, the council relied on the provisions of the new law. He concluded his submissions on that basis. The judges listened carefully. One judge adjusted his glasses and asked the counsel of the local council,
How do you justify taking a man's property without compensation?
The counsel of the local council struggled to answer. Another judge spoke sharply.
To claim that the law has been repealed, albeit true, does not extinguish rights previously acquired unless the new law expressly says so. Can you show this court any law giving the council such authority?
The courtroom became tense. The counsel of the local council remained silent. Then the presiding judge finally spoke.
No person is above the law.
Tears immediately formed in Mkapendeza's eyes. The judgment continued.
That the appellant, Pandem Mlalahoi, was the lawful owner of the property. The eviction was unlawful, forceful, and unconstitutional.
Gasps filled the courtroom. Pandem's elderly mother burst into tears and made a loud cry until a court assistant asked her to remain quiet. Then the judges concluded.
The respondent shall immediately vacate the premises and compensate the appellant for damages suffered over the last 7 years, including arrears of rent. Costs of this appeal are awarded to the appellant.
Then the judges left the courtroom. Mkapendeza looked at Pandem with trembling lips. Then she whispered softly.
You hear that, Pandem? We finally won.
Eglinstall buried her face in her mother's shoulder and cried silently. Pandem's elderly mother knelt on the court floor, raising her hands upwards while crying silently.
Respect the law. Defend justice. Protect families.
Subscribe to our channel and follow the powerful continuation of this story in part 3.